So previously I stated that Mega Man X was going into a strange direction. This is because there's a lot of infighting within the Capcom company. The contestants were Keiji Inafune and Capcom themselves. Now Keiji Inafune is the mastermind of the Mega Man X series, and he's also the creator of Zero, which is pretty much why Zero is basically the Han Solo of Mega Man X. Now after X5, Inafune's next step within his plan was to create Mega Man Zero, and X5 was meant to be the last game of the series. Within the Mega Man X official complete works, Inafune states, "I had honestly planned for X5 to be the last title in the series, but somehow I found myself with X6. I feel I owe the fans an apology, but I had to admit the series was starting to go in a direction that was out of my control." What he means by this is, Capcom greenlit X6 without his knowledge. So to Inafune, while he was working on Mega Man Zero, this new game suddenly sprung up on him, and that's when a power struggle between Inafune and Capcom began. Now ultimately, Inafune lost his battle, so he had to take X6 into account. Now many fans would come to Inafune's defense and call Capcom a money-grubbing and greedy company, and in most cases that's true. However, I would like to point out the detail that Inafune had very little to do with X5 as well. Within the same book, he states, "I had very little to do with X5. I just told the team to finish off the series with this title and left it at that." So this means that even though Inafune oversaw the project, there was a development team that worked on X5 entirely by themselves. Now this is just wishful thinking on my part. I have really no evidence to back this up, but I would like to believe that Capcom had personal investment within the Mega Man X series, and they wanted X to remain as the main character. Because in Mega Man Zero, X wouldn't have been playable at all. So either they saw that as a bad move or a bad financial move. Either way, both Mega Man X and Mega Man Zero would jump up the timeline so much that it would look like a Legend of Zelda timeline. However, for our purposes, that doesn't really matter as this is a character analysis. Yet this does matter because both games will take X into a different direction. In Mega Man X6 is only 3 weeks instead of 3 years after the good ending of X5, and Zero is still dead, sort of. Humanity has went underground in order to survive as the surface of the world has become uninhabitable, and the Red Boys were tasked to restore the world. However, the world then fell under the attack of the Zero Nightmare, and X was tasked to investigate the matter, which ends up being a ploy created by Gate, a Red Boy scientist with extremely advanced engineering skill, and also happened to be an old colleague of Alias. Regardless of whether X personally defeats the Nightmare and regains Zero as a partner, and therefore create the infamous hit myself to repair myself scene.
ダメージが完全に回復するまで身を隠していたんだ。その間にこのおもちゃが世間を騒がせてしまったようだな。
X6 actually shows X at the climax of his personality. He's confident, unwavering, and no longer questions his ideals. Zero's death reaffirmed to X that the only one who could work for the ideal utopia is himself, and the only way he can make that happen is by stopping anyone that chooses to threaten that. This ironically makes X less likely to hold back during his battles, and if anyone chooses to threaten him, he instantly puts his dukes up and gets ready to brawl. Even after defeating Sigma, for the first time X triumphantly speaks to him, saying no matter how many times he is revived, he will destroy him. Despite X being more willing to fight, his softer side continues to remain. Feeling sympathy for his navigator Alia, he preserved Gate's body for Alia to take care of. Alia was thankful for the gesture, and through that, Alia became committed to advocating X's dream for that utopia. And this would show Alia as one of the pillar of supports that X is thankful of as time goes on. Now jump 100 years into the future with Mega Man Zero. Again, Zero is the protagonist of this series, and X is unplayable. While I cannot personally confirm this, mostly because I have no way of personally citing this myself, it is widely believed that Inafune was originally going to have X become the main villain of the Mega Man Zero series. And I am inclined to believe this, as the game was largely hinting at X being the main villain, only for it to end up being an inferior copy version of him called Copy X. Copy X was inferior to the original X in nearly every way, even by emotion. Despite this, the original X still existed, but as a cyber elf. Despite this, he has a much colder personality when he first speaks to Zero, and told him to destroy the copy with extreme prejudice, which is very, very unlike X. At the end of the game, he confesses to Zero that he began to grow tired of the fighting, and his heart was no longer into it. The longer the wars went on, the less emotion he felt for his enemies. What he means by this is, he started to see his enemies as just combatants that he needed to destroy in order to preserve the peace. And if X is no longer able to feel for his people, then he's no longer X, he's just a warrior. Frankly, he didn't want to be this way. He retired himself by stealing away his body and lived on as a cyber elf. That said, he does request for Zero to take up his mantle as defender of the innocent to carry on his dream, which Zero gladly accepts. MegaMan Zero's interpretation of X is an interesting take on him, but it's lacking a substance due to it being 100 years skipped, and that's a huge mistake for people that want to learn more about X. We have no real idea on why he became this way, why he became more colder, and even further, if Inifune wanted to make him evil, that would have been far more worse because we definitely needed something, a substance, in order to figure out why he became that way. Now, of course, this is part of Capcom's writing style, in that they want the fans to theorize how things came to be, much like between the Mega Man era and the Mega Man X era, within that 100-year time skip. However, something like this, you can't just put it under the rug and just say theorize about it. You truly need something, a substance, because personally to me, if he ever did become evil, as soon as he saw Zero, he would stop being evil. That's just my take on it. You may agree or disagree, but like I said in part 2, X and Zero are the best of friends. They allow each other to grow. So as soon as he saw Zero, X would just come to his senses just like that and say, hey, I was in a pretty dark place, I got pretty tired, but I know what I did, I'm going to try to fix that. While X being evil or X being tired of fighting is pretty interesting, there's no substance to back that up, and I had to really disagree with Inifune on his take on X within the Mega Man Zero series. Ironically, X6 is much clearer for X resolve, and despite going against Inifune's wishes, it doesn't damage X in any way. In fact, I would say X6 shows the best in X's personality in comparison to the rest of the series. Now take everything I just said about X6 and throw it out all the way for this next game. In X7, an unknown amount of time passes by from the events of X6, and despite the world slowly rebuilding from the devastation of the Eurasian incident, the Mavericks were running rampant as X has decided to retire from fighting from the front lines, growing tired and wishing to find more peaceful solutions. Do you see the familiarity here from Mega Man Zero? It's unfortunate, but X7 does the same mistake as Mega Man Zero did, leaving out the important information as to the events that built up to X's retirement, and they brush it aside with a time skip, and that just can't work. It's even more baffling because in X6, it left off on such a high note that X resolved to never give up the fight. Now literally at the very beginning of the next game, X gives up the fight. There's no real excuse for it either. As soon as X leaves the fight, the Mavericks have gone completely rampant to the point where another faction called Red Alert had to step in order to help the Maverick Hunters. So it goes completely against what X wants to do, which is create peace. And it's just not working. Sitting in the sidelines did not work at all, but he still continues to do so and still continues to put the world in a total devastating point. It just doesn't make any sense. The truly horrible part about this character arc for X is it amounts to absolutely nothing, as X will automatically join Zero and Axel, the new character, after rescuing 64 Reploids or after the destruction of all 8 Mavericks. Unfortunately, this is just as spontaneous as the recruitment requirement, as X seemingly looks like he just grew some balls. Seriously, X is unsufferably whiny in this game, and at no point does he get better. In mostly all of his cutscenes, he berates Axel for fighting Mavericks, and he wants nothing more than to punish him, and every Maverick encounter amounts to him pleading to each of them to stop fighting.
How long must this madness go on?
It's downright insane. In fact, I would go as far as to say this is a Flanderization of X's character. To those who don't know, Flanderization is a coined term to indicate when a character has gone so far on the deep end with one defining personality trait that it overwhelms the rest of the character. While X's idealism does serve against him from time to time, it has never been this bad.
Another pointless conflict has begun.
X, don't overthink this. This time our only choice is to fight.
We've made this mistake time and time again. Why must Reploids continue this accursed cycle of aggression?
At least X trusting Double in X4 could be excused as a moment of stupid. This though, there's just no excuse for being this stupid and acting completely ignorant for this long. I can go on and on about how sickening this Kabi X is, but there are some interesting notes about X that genuinely reveals more about him. For instance, Red Alert Mavericks gives some rather strong counterpoints to X's extreme idealism, particularly by Snipe Anteater and Soldier Stone Kong.
How long must this madness go on?
Let me ask you, how long has this madness been going on? The annals of history contain endless records of war. The madness will never end.
You're wrong. We can create a world without war. Utopia is not just a dream.
You can't build a utopia on top of the graves of rebels like myself.
Why? Why do you insist on fighting?
First, I ask you, what is strength? What is war?
A method for imposing one's will upon another.
Precisely. Now, no more talk. Let our swords speak for us. Only the victors will be viewed as righteous in the eyes of history.
Both of these will come up later on. That said, the much more interesting note comes from X's ending, where X and Cygnus are discussing the possibility of Axel becoming a Maverick Hunter. Unfortunately, after everything that has happened, X is still an insufferable twat. But during the discussion, X does end up saying one thing.
Never. You could never train somebody to be a hunter like me. It isn't possible.
When I first heard this, my immediate response was, this has gotta be some translation error. So I did end up looking at the Japanese version, and while the wording is slightly different, it does kinda end up sounding the same way, but it's still just bad. So here I am wondering, why would X say something like this? And while it is easy to just pass this off as writers having no idea how X's character is, and honestly that could be the case, that's just an easy cop-out for something that I'm personally not satisfied with. So after some serious thought, I went with this. You can never train somebody to be a hunter like me is deceptively worded to make X sound like he's speaking about skill. However, he's not talking about skill. He's talking about his emotions. And when you put it under that light, it makes complete and total sense. X clearly states it is impossible to have a hunter with this sense of emotion and idealism. Now this turns out to be true, especially when you look back to X4 with the Repliforce, as the Repliforce have decided to fight for their independence instead of speaking of things peacefully. The closest to X's personality was Iris, and she was designed to be the counter to Colonel's militaristic values, as the Reploid engineers just couldn't figure out how to make the perfect Maverick Hunter combined with the lack of bloodlust. Even further, Alia would grow to share X's dream, but clearly isn't designed to be a fighter. And Zero, despite rivaling X in power, is designed to be the antithesis of X, being a no-nonsense fighter set on getting a job done regardless of the situation. So when X says it is impossible, time has shown this to be true. And as we move on to X8, his words were proved to be correct. When Axel is shown to be a full-fledged Maverick Hunter, he completely lacks any of X's emotions, or even Zero's jaded view of the world. In fact, he enjoys fighting Mavericks, falling much in line with the previous hunters like Maverick Dragoon or Storm Eagle. That said, X seems to appreciate it this time, as his episode in X7 seems to have mostly been corrected. In fact, they even go as far as to say that X's desire to not fight is seen as wishy-washy, and even Alias seems to be worried about this line of thinking.
Darn!
X? What's the matter? The mission's only just begun.
That's right. It's begun again. How long must this war go on?
Just the thought of wiping the floor with those Mavericks makes my trigger finger itch.
Axel!
No, Alia. Axel's right. There's no time to be wishy-washy here. Even as we speak, Mavericks are causing havoc.
X seems to have adapted a no-nonsense policy against the enemy. Even the Mavericks in question that have proven to not have been infected by the Sigma virus, which is completely impossible as the new generation Reploids have copy chips which are unable to be infected by the Sigma virus. But the new generation Reploids are choosing to go Maverick, and this is something that X doesn't seem to understand. In fact, when questioned upon this, X falls back to his more aggressive idea, relying on his sense of justice to push him through each fight.
This is no ordinary riot. This is revenge. Revenge for all the Reploids you labeled Maverick and threw onto this scrap heap.
Mavericks bring only disaster and destruction. We have no choice but to stop them.
This is what you mean when you speak of justice? It's you who should be scrapped. There's no place for Reploids like you in the new world we will create.
It may be possible that X has mostly accepted that he'll have to destroy any target that threatens the world. This, of course, leads to some rather straightforward conversations with the Mavericks, with X getting right down to business as he isn't satisfied with their answers.
Looks like you can't accept the fact that we're not Mavericks.
Are you making weapons for Sigma here? Is Sigma controlling you?
What exactly is controlling you, X? Your precious justice? Is that it?
Dark Mantis, your actions are those of a Maverick!
Now, X8 is mostly based around the orbital elevator, created to send supplies into space. This would eventually lead to the humans abandoning the Earth and sending themselves into space to avoid the Maverick War. The new generation Reploids are tasked with maintaining the orbital elevator. Their leader at the time is Lumine, who turns out to be the main villain of X8. During the time he plays a charade, acting as if he has been captured by a newly rebuilt Vial, and the acting villain for the time is Sigma. Despite being a stand-in for Lumine, Sigma does have personal beef to settle with X, and seemingly only with X, once and for all.
Welcome, Maverick Hunter. It's good to see you again, X. Our meeting was fated, X. Our destinies come to a head right here, right now. The time has come to usher in a new age, and you, X, are an essential part of it. Your dedication to what you refer to as justice is what first got me thinking. I realized the imperfection of this world and decided I must change it.
Don't blame me for your insanity, Sigma!
It's too late, X. The gears are in motion. There's no turning back now. My children were the ones, X. The new generation Reploids were the ones. My children are responsible for the development of space, mankind's lifeline.
Children? What are you talking about?
The Jacob Project. The program that gave birth to the new generation Reploids. It was all my doing. The world that was birthed by that plan rightfully belongs to me. Now, X, you will be destroyed along with the rest of this decayed world!
Now, this harkens back to the Super Nintendo titles, where Sigma has become committed to fighting X. Sigma states it's X's sense of justice that drove him into fulfilling his plan and allow his so-called children to carry out his will. At first, it doesn't really make sense, but upon Sigma's defeat, Lumine's words paint a clearer picture.
Lumine! What are you doing? Don't tell me you've gone Maverick too.
Maverick? You don't really think that's the case, do you? That's why you can't finish me off, right? You don't have it in you. The copy chips we new generation Reploids possess, They were derived from data from hundreds of old model Reploids. That means, of course, that Sigma was also included in the mix. Do you understand what I'm getting at here?
Copy chip? Sigma? Does that mean that I'll go nuts like he did?
Sorry, but prototypes like you don't have the specs to cause something like that. Besides, was Sigma really crazy? He rebelled against your world, but he had his reasons. The rest of us new Reploids could turn like that at any moment. This decision to wage battle against the old world was made consciously. In other words, we possess the power to go Maverick at will.
If we ignore the dumb line about Lumine being able to go Maverick at will, because seriously, that is not a phenomenon, then we have our big reason why Sigma said X's sense of justice got him thinking. To make it frank, X's way of thinking is an old way of thinking. His dream of an ideal utopia is being denied, especially against Reploids that clearly do not want to follow it. Even further, they aren't infected by the virus, nor are they being manipulated similarly to how the Repliforce was being manipulated. Upon that realization, everything that X believed in has led to this one moment. Throughout the X series, there has always been a strong amount of Mavericks that were not reprogrammed nor infected by the virus. The most extreme example is Vile. But all the Mavericks in X1 were not infected by the virus, and a good majority of them in X2 were not infected either. All of the Repliforce were not infected, and in X6, while one can argue the case of the investigators being reprogrammed, they were clearly not labeled as Mavericks. In X7, Red Alert were fighting for their own ideals, and finally in X8, the new generation Reploids were acting of their own accord. It is in that point X began to think to himself as he lowered his weapon, am I just delaying the inevitable? This all goes back to Sigma's goal that has been stated in both Maverick Hunter X and the original X1, which is his desire to create his own utopia where Reploids ruled the world, and humans were no longer part of their existence. It is why X was so special to begin with, because he had complete free will, along with his ability to worry and then enact bravery against that worry, and he is allowed to use his emotions to push his potential. However, his potential has always come from the wish of his creator, Dr. Light. X's dream for humans and Reploids to live in harmony is also a proxy of Dr. Light's dream. However, if the Reploids do not want this, then what right does X have to enforce this dream upon the others? Wouldn't that just mean he's just a Maverick only for a different side? Does that seem far-fetched? Well, just listen to X.
Awakening. That's how Lumine described it. He said this was evolution. If he's right, then what are we doing?
X's idealism has been tested, and frankly, I personally feel it has been shattered. X's sense of justice is no longer seen as justice, but oppression. X now feels his duty to protect the humans instead has been used as a tool to oppress the freedoms of Reploids that have thought differently from himself. However, there is always one thing that has kept X going. The very core of X's will has always been, if you are an enemy, you will be taken down.
That settles it. You're definitely a Maverick. Sounds like you've gone Maverick. Looks like you've gone Maverick. I'm taking you out. Face it, you've gone Maverick.
Eliminate the Mavericks. The Mavericks. Eliminate the Mavericks.
You're a Maverick. Have you gone Maverick as well? You're Maverick. I'll have to stop you. You Mavericks, you're under Sigma's control, aren't you? Is that what you Mavericks believe? What Sigma believes? But that's...
I know what you're going to say. You think that idea to be Maverick, don't you? That's why we are forced to fight, you see?
X has proven this time and time again, that regardless of the validity of one's ideals, if you are a Maverick, then all bets are off. Regardless of how X feels after the battle, he has always justified his stance with the idea that he is making the world a better place without the danger of the Maverick threat. But if the Mavericks are simply Reploids that are fighting for their own dreams, then what if their ideal utopia is better than X's? It's the one thing that Sigma has always been fighting for this entire time, regardless of how one would feel about his methods. And quite simply, the new generation Reploids are so far advanced that the idea of working with the humans seems backwards. Even without Sigma's DNA, which so far has not proven to do anything besides copy his body, it would have been very likely that the new generation Reploids would have rebelled against the humans anyway, much like how the Repliforce has done before them. While X remains as the most advanced Reploid ever created by mankind due to his human-like emotions, X falls into the same problem that Zero has. Ultimately, X and Zero are in a never-ending mission that leads down an endless cycle of fighting. As long as people oppose the status quo laid out by the humans, X will always be sent out to defend it, even if he has his own doubts. Anything that is labeled as a Maverick, he will ultimately swallow his pacifism and fight. While X does not have the same hindering program that Zero has, X is hindered by his obligation as a soldier of peace. X will not ever allow the humans to be harmed under his watch, and he will never allow humanity to never have the chance to live happily. As such, he will ultimately always be against the Reploids, despite being one of them. And this would come full circle in MegaMan Zero, where X would be the one that builds the Elysium that he always wanted called Neo Arcadia, and would continue to keep the peace for the humans, despite constantly fighting his fellow Reploids in the end. This could explain the reasoning behind the writer's idea of X turning evil in MegaMan Zero, or at the very least turn into a hardened soldier that lacked his ability to care. It is only fortunate that X realized his path was wrong, and he forced himself out of the fight. Despite all this though, the bottom line is X wants nothing more than peace. However, that desire is an ideal passed down from his father. It may very well be that without that ideal, X would have accepted the reality situation long ago. However, this is what makes X so special. Even in the darkest of times, X has always fought for the future and remained as a symbol of hope.